Ever wondered what happens when you just disappear from someone's life? Not halfway, not in silence laced with hope, but truly disappear. No calls, no texts, no trace. In a world addicted to constant noise and connection, your absence becomes more than silence. It becomes a mirror. And for those who once took your presence for granted, that mirror becomes unbearable. You see, people rarely notice stability while it's there. They only feel its weight when it's gone. When you walk away, not in anger but in quiet clarity, it disrupts their illusion of control. It forces them to face what they ignored, the value of your presence, the depth of your patience, the calm you brought to their chaos. This video isn't about playing games, it's about reclaiming peace. If you've ever been in a relationship or a situation where someone treated you like a background character in your own story, this is for you. Today we explore what they truly feel when you simply vanish, from denial to obsession, from regret to awakening. And by the end, you'll understand why sometimes the most powerful move is no move at all. The act of walking away isn't just about leaving them behind. It's about returning to yourself. If you're ready to reconnect with your own strength, to stop being an option and start being your own source of peace, drop a comment below with the words, "I'm done being an option." And if this message resonates, support the journey by subscribing to Stoic Station and giving this video a like. It helps us reach those who need this message most. Now, let's begin. 1. The sting of rejection. They never truly believed you would walk away. In their eyes, your presence was permanent, like a silent promise written in the background of their life. You were always there, showing up, giving, forgiving, holding space even when they didn't deserve it. To them, you were the constant, the one who stayed no matter how unbalanced the dynamic became. They mistook your consistency for weakness, your patience for passivity, your loyalty for something unconditional. But the truth is, everyone has a limit. And one day, without warning, you reached yours. When you disappeared, it wasn't just the lack of your voice or your presence that rattled them. It was the collapse of an illusion. The illusion that they had control over you, that no matter how they treated you, you would still orbit around their world like a moon tethered to their gravity. But you didn't just drift, you detached. And in that moment, the sting of rejection wasn't just about losing you. It was about losing the version of themselves that had grown comfortable taking you for granted. This type of pain is different. It's not loud. It doesn't come with arguments or dramatic goodbyes. It arrives in the silence, in the empty space where your reassurance used to live, in the absence of your energy, your presence, your quiet support that held more weight than they ever realized. And now, it's gone. They're left stunned, not because you raised your voice, but because you stopped speaking altogether. You stopped explaining yourself. You stopped showing up. You stopped allowing their inconsistency to have access to your consistency. And that is what pierces the deepest. What hurts them now isn't your disappearance. It's the meaning behind it. It's the realization that you no longer need them to see your value in order for you to honor it. You've evolved past the phase of waiting for recognition. You're not walking away to make a point. You're walking away because you finally remembered your worth. And this is where the true sting begins. They're not mourning the loss of you. They're mourning the loss of their power over you. The quiet certainty in your absence speaks louder than any confrontation ever could. You didn't slam the door. You simply left it open and chose not to walk back through it. Now they sit with the echo of your absence, replaying everything they once overlooked. And as the days go on, the sting doesn't fade, it deepens. Because they now understand that the man who used to fight for the connection has left the ring entirely, not with resentment, not with revenge, but with resolve. You didn't vanish to teach them a lesson. You vanished because you finally learned your own. 2. The void of missing you. There's a kind of emptiness that doesn't announce itself right away. It settles in slowly, almost silently, like dust gathering on furniture in a room no longer lived in. At first, they may not even notice your absence in a conscious way. Life continues. They wake up, check their phone, go about their day, make plans, laugh with others. But underneath all of that motion, something is missing, and it grows more undeniable with each passing moment. When you were in their life, things had a quiet rhythm. Even the stillness between you carried meaning. You didn't have to fill every space with words, because your presence alone made everything feel anchored, real, safe. You were the steady heartbeat beneath the noise, the silent reassurance that no matter how chaotic the world became, they could find some part of themselves when they were near you. And now, that feeling is gone. Not because you said too much, but because you stopped saying anything at all. Your absence isn't just a lack of conversation, it's a missing frequency, a hum that used to vibrate through their life, even when they weren't paying attention. They try to replace it. They scroll endlessly. They make new plans. They seek new company, hoping that something or someone can replicate the feeling they didn't even realize they'd grown dependent on. But nothing quite fits. It all feels off, forced, shallow, temporary, and that's when it hits them. They don't just miss you. They miss the way they felt when they were with you. They miss the version of themselves that came alive in your presence, the part of them that laughed a little easier, breathed a little deeper, and felt a little more seen. You didn't just give them companionship, you gave them emotional depth. You were a mirror that reflected back the best parts of them, even when they couldn't see it for themselves. Now that you're gone, they're left not only with the silence of your absence, but with the hollow echo of their own disconnection from self. You were the bridge between who they were and who they aspired to be, and without you, that bridge has collapsed into something they can't seem to rebuild. Time doesn't heal this kind of void. In fact, time makes it louder. Because the more days go by without hearing from you, the more undeniable your impact becomes. You were not just another person. You were the reminder that peace, connection, and emotional safety are not abstract ideas. They're experiences, and you embodied them. And now that you're no longer there, they come to a painful realization. The spaces you once filled are not easily occupied. The connection they had with you was not disposable. It was rare. It was real. And in your absence, they finally begin to understand, not what they lost, but what they never truly appreciated when it was theirs. 3. Overwhelming curiosity. There's a unique kind of restlessness that takes hold when someone who once had access to your world suddenly finds themselves locked out of it. At first, they may pretend not to notice. They'll tell themselves that your silence is temporary, that you're just busy or moving on in the way people do. But over time, the silence stretches, and in that stillness, something shifts. Curiosity begins to stir, and not the light kind, not the casual wondering of where someone ended up. This is different. This is the kind of curiosity that consumes. Because now, you've become a question that won't stop echoing in their mind. Who are you now? Have you changed? Have you healed? Are you with someone else? Someone who looks at you the way they once did, but no longer can? Or are you simply enjoying the quiet peace they never knew how to give you? The not knowing is what tears at them. You've gone dark, and in a world where every detail of life is broadcasted in stories, posts and statuses, your absence becomes deafening. While others overshare every moment, you've become the exception, the silence that screams louder than noise ever could. And that mystery, that void of information, becomes the stage where their imagination plays out 100 different stories. None of them end with you missing them. All of them end with them being replaced. They scroll through your old photos, hoping to find clues, rereading your captions like lines in a forgotten novel. They check to see if you've watched their stories, if you've liked a post, if your name appears anywhere in the spaces you used to fill. And every time they come up empty, the curiosity tightens its grip. It's no longer about interest, it's about obsession. Because now, you're not just someone who left. You're someone they can no longer predict, no longer understand, no longer control. You've become a ghost, but not the kind that fades into memory. You're the kind that lingers in questions, that haunts the silence, that lives in the gaps between their thoughts. You no longer exist in their reality, but you dominate their mind. And the more you withhold, the more they chase shadows. This isn't revenge. It's not a game. It's simply what happens when presence turns to absence without explanation. You've become the story they can't stop telling themselves, because every time they look for answers, they find only the reminder that you've chosen to disappear, and that they no longer have the right to know why. 4. Deep self-reflection. There comes a moment after the calls stop, after the messages go unanswered, when the silence becomes so loud it demands attention. At first, they resist it. They drown it out with distractions, with noise, with the comfort of routine. But eventually, when the world grows quiet again, when the faces blur and the nights get longer, they are left with only themselves. And it is in that stillness that the mirror finally appears. It doesn't arrive gently. It confronts. It whispers questions they once refused to ask. It softens their pride in a way no conversation ever could. Slowly, the armor begins to crack, and beneath it lies doubt, remorse, realization. They begin to remember the times they turned away when you reached out, the moments they dismissed your feelings, the ways they minimized your presence, expecting you to stay even when they stopped showing up. And now, without your energy in the room, without your steady presence to lean on, the weight of their own actions starts to press down. Self-reflection rarely grows in comfort. It blooms in the absence of what once anchored us. And your silence? It becomes the seed, not as a punishment, but as a mirror held to their truth. Because when you stopped chasing, you gave them the space to finally face who they were when they had you, and more importantly, who they chose to be when they started to lose you. As you heal, as you rise and reclaim the pieces of yourself they never took time to understand, they sit in the wake of that decision, realizing it wasn't you who walked away without reason. It was them who stood still while you were giving everything. You didn't leave out of spite. You left out of clarity, and now they are forced to confront a reality far more painful than absence, the knowledge that they lost someone who was never asking for perfection, only presence. 5. The urge to pursue. There comes a point when the silence becomes unbearable, not just quiet, but suffocating. And in that silence, you begin to take shape again. Not as a faded memory, but as a presence they can no longer access, yet can't stop thinking about. You become real in a new way, vivid in their mind, alive in every corner of what they've tried to forget. They start revisiting old photos, reading through messages they once ignored. Moments that once felt ordinary now feel sacred, and suddenly the weight of your absence turns into a craving they can't suppress. That's when the late-night texts appear, short, cautious, designed to test if you're still reachable. They'll like your old posts, mention you in conversations with mutual friends, search for signs that you haven't moved on too far. Every action is a quiet confession. They miss you, not just the person, but the feeling of being close to someone who saw them deeply, who showed up without being asked. But by the time they feel this urge to pursue, you're no longer standing in the same place. You've grown. You've healed in silence, built strength in solitude, and learned how to live without needing what you once thought was essential. Let them chase if they must, but never forget they're chasing the version of you they left behind. And you've already become someone they never expected to lose. 6. The battle between relief and regret. In the beginning, your absence might feel like a breath of fresh air to them. The weight is lifted, the air feels lighter, and they convince themselves that distance is exactly what they needed. They tell their friends they're fine, that they're finally free, that the silence feels like peace. And for a moment, maybe it does. But freedom without meaning is just distraction in disguise. They try to fill the newfound space. New faces, new places, shallow conversations that mimic connection, but never quite touch the soul. There are laughs, sure, moments that sparkle on the surface, but nothing settles, nothing sticks, because everything they encounter lacks the depth you offered effortlessly. Your presence didn't just occupy space, it rooted it. There was a quiet intimacy in how you saw them, in how you showed up without noise, but with full presence. And once that kind of connection is gone, the world feels a little dimmer. Regret doesn't knock down the door. It creeps in, slowly, softly. It whispers in the quiet moments after the crowd leaves, when they're alone with their thoughts, and there's nothing left to distract them. That's when they start to replay everything. Not just the good moments, but the moments where they didn't show up for you, the things they took for granted, the ease with which they let you slip away. It hits them not as a sharp pain, but a hollow ache. A realization that the freedom they once celebrated came at a cost they didn't calculate, and now, in the stillness they once craved, they're left facing the truth. Letting you go wasn't the right decision. It wasn't clarity. It was a mistake. One they can't undo. 7. The desire to play the game. When silence no longer gives them control, they change their strategy. Not with sincerity, but with subtle manipulation wrapped in performance. They begin posting curated glimpses of a life they want you to believe they're thriving in. Flawless smiles, late-night adventures, cryptic quotes about growth, independence, and how they've never been better. But underneath the polished surface lies a quiet desperation. These moments aren't shared to celebrate healing, they're shared to provoke, to test, to see if you're still watching. It's a game, one they once played with ease, back when your emotions were easier to trigger, back when you still reacted to the breadcrumbs, still answered the late-night texts, still reached out when the silence grew cold. But that man no longer exists. The version of you that once sought clarity in confusion has been replaced by a man who no longer entertains half-truths. You don't flinch when they hint. You don't chase when they pull. You don't respond when they try to spark something from the ashes. And that stillness, the emotional discipline you now carry, becomes their unraveling, because the game only works if you play it. And when you no longer play, they lose their power. Your calm doesn't mean you're unaware. It means you've grown past the need to prove your worth, past the urge to defend your silence. You've reclaimed the energy you once gave so freely, and now you hold it with intention. Let them post, hint, provoke. None of it touches you anymore. You've become a man grounded in truth, not reaction, and in that groundedness they no longer find the buttons they once pushed so easily. They're playing a game, but you've already walked off the board. 8. The crushing weight of silence. There's a certain kind of noise that only silence can make. It's not immediate. It builds slowly, like pressure rising beneath the surface of something once taken for granted. At first, your absence feels like a pause, a temporary break in the rhythm they were used to. But as the days stretch into weeks with no message, no explanation, no final words, what was once silence becomes something else entirely. it becomes deafening. They begin to feel everything they once brushed aside. The times they let your calls go unanswered. The moments they shrugged off your emotions, convinced you'd always be there, always understanding, always forgiving. They thought they had time to show up better, to say the right thing eventually, to fix what was quietly unraveling. But that time has vanished along with your presence. Now, it's not just the lack of your words that haunts them, it's what that silence represents. You're not angry, you're not playing games, you're simply done. And in a world that thrives on instant replies and impulsive connection, your stillness is the loudest message of all. It demands reflection without offering distraction. It forces them to sit with the echoes of their own actions, without any reassurance that a resolution is coming. They may search for signs, scroll through old conversations, even try to provoke a reaction, but nothing comes. Because this silence isn't meant to punish. It's meant to protect. It's your boundary, drawn not in anger, but in clarity. Let them sit in the quiet. Let their thoughts spiral and their memories replay. Let the weight of what they lost sink in without interference. Sometimes, the most powerful truth is the one spoken through your absence. And the louder their mind screams, the more undeniable it becomes. Your silence is not emptiness, it's closure. 9. The fear that brings them crawling back. Fear doesn't show up at the beginning, it waits. It lingers quietly in the background until every distraction has been exhausted, every replacement has fallen short, and every attempt to forget you has failed. That's when it creeps in, slowly at first, then all at once. The fear that you've truly moved on. The fear that someone else now stands in the place they once took for granted. The fear that your love, once so freely offered, is now locked behind a door they no longer have the key to. This fear is different from regret. Regret looks backward, filled with what-ifs and missed chances. But fear looks at the present and sees a future where you are no longer reachable, no longer wondering, no longer waiting. And that terrifies them. Because deep down, they always believed you'd be there. Not physically maybe, but emotionally. Some part of them assumed you'd always be just a message away, just a moment of weakness from returning. They never expected you to actually find peace in their absence. They never thought you'd truly let go. And now, faced with that reality, pride crumbles. The image they tried to project, the confidence they wore like armor, all of it shatters beneath the weight of fear. That's when the messages come. Not out of clarity, but desperation. They reach out, sometimes in anger, sometimes in sorrow. They might send apologies, confessions, or try to casually reconnect as if nothing ever happened. But you can feel it in their words, the panic, the vulnerability, the realization that the version of you they knew is gone. But here's the truth, they're not chasing you. They're chasing the version of themselves that felt whole when they were with you, the version that was loved, seen, grounded, and in your absence, they've come undone. But you didn't just walk away, you walked toward something better, toward healing, growth, and emotional sovereignty. You became someone stronger, someone no longer defined by their presence or absence, and no amount of pleading can reverse that evolution. What they fear most has already happened. You outgrew them. And the scariest part of all, you're never coming back. 10. The realization of emotional independence. There comes a turning point, not marked by loud declarations or dramatic goodbyes, but by a quiet internal shift. It's the moment you stop looking backward, the moment you stop checking your phone, the moment you stop hoping they'll understand what they lost. It's subtle at first, almost imperceptible, but then it grows. What once felt like a wound begins to feel like an awakening. You didn't disappear to hurt them. You didn't fall silent to manipulate. You stepped away because something within you whispered that it was time to return to yourself. And in that space, free from their opinions, their validation, their ever-shifting affection, you began to hear your own voice again. For the first time in a long time, you remembered what it felt like to simply be, without performance, without chasing, without waiting for someone to finally treat you as you deserved. You realized you no longer needed their closure to find your peace. You didn't need to be chosen in order to feel worthy. Their absence stopped feeling like a loss and started feeling like liberation. You stopped orbiting around their moods, their silence, their games, and instead you began to build something sacred, a life rooted in truth, in solitude, in quiet strength. Emotional independence isn't cold. It's not distant or detached. It's calm. It's whole. It's the gentle knowing that your happiness is no longer negotiable, that your worth cannot be measured by someone else's ability to see it. You're not avoiding pain. You've processed it. You're not closed off. You're finally open, but only to what aligns with who you truly are. While they remain caught in a loop of curiosity, regret, and control, you've stepped into a new story, one where you are no longer the supporting role in their drama, but the author of your own piece. That shift, that quiet reclamation of self, is something they never saw coming. You didn't just move on, you moved inward. And in doing so, you became everything they never thought you'd become, complete without them. Personal reflection and life lessons. The power of disappearing and emotional independence. These 10 stages is like walking a man's emotional journey from heartbreak to wholeness. And as someone who has lived through silence, longing, and eventually liberation, I can tell you this. Disappearing isn't about revenge. It's not about creating pain in someone else. It's about reclaiming something far more sacred, your peace, your self-worth, your voice. At first, they feel the sting of rejection, not because you said goodbye, but because you stopped explaining yourself. You stopped begging to be seen. And that shift, it rattles them to the core, because your presence, once consistent and forgiving, suddenly becomes the very thing they can no longer reach. And when they try to fill the void, they find that what's missing isn't just you. It's the version of themselves that only came alive in your light. That realization, it's haunting. Curiosity creeps in. Obsession takes root. They don't understand how you've gone silent in a world that thrives on attention. But you're not trying to make a point. You're living in clarity. And in that stillness, they're forced to face the one thing they never wanted to, their own reflection. No more distractions. No more control, just the quiet ache of consequence. Eventually, they pursue, not because they truly want you back, but because they miss who they were with you. But by then, you're no longer standing still. You've grown, shifted, evolved. The man they thought would always be there has transformed into someone they never expected, someone who no longer needs their presence to feel whole. The most powerful moment of all is the realization that emotional independence doesn't come from being cold, it comes from being healed. You've stopped performing for validation. You've stopped orbiting around people who can't meet you where you are. You've chosen solitude over begging, peace over chaos, and alignment over attention. That's not weakness. That's strength most people never develop. The lesson? Your silence, your absence, your boundaries, they're not forms of punishment. They're proof that you've finally chosen yourself. And in choosing yourself, you've not just walked away from someone else's story. You've begun writing your own. One rooted in self-respect, clarity, and a love that doesn't ask to be earned, because it starts within. Advice to carry forward. If you ever find yourself giving everything just to be halfway seen, pause. If your consistency is being mistaken for dependence, step back. And if someone only realizes your value in your absence, don't return to prove it. Disappear not to cause pain, but to protect peace. The man who learns to be complete without external validation becomes untouchable, not because he's unreachable, but because he's unshakable. And that, my friend, is the version of you the world, and especially those who took you for granted, never saw coming. You don't owe your silence to them. You owe your freedom to yourself. If this message spoke to something deeper in you, if it reminded you of your worth, your power, or your right to peace, consider becoming a channel member. Your support allows us to continue creating meaningful content for those on a similar path. But if membership isn't for you, simply subscribing goes a long way. Every action, every gesture of support helps us reach more people who need to hear these truths. Wherever you are in your journey, remember this: you're no longer waiting to be chosen. You've chosen yourself. I'll see you in the next video. Until then, stay grounded, stay free.